Hello, Olga, and thank you for accepting our invitation to have a very informal conversation about the Former West project.
Thank you.
It's very interesting for us that in conjunction with your very interesting exhibition, that was a research exhibition of the Former West project, and which helped us look from a different perspective at the realities and the artistic strategies as well that are shedding a light on the transformations in society, but also transformation in artistic discourse in the last 20 years, roughly, or let's say in this contemporaneity, in our contemporaneity that is marked by the fall of the Soviet bloc. As you know, in our project, we're trying to approach this period and the global condition following 1989 from the perspective of the West and from the perspective of a transformation in the hegemony that the West has and used to have in a different manner and to a different degree in the Cold War era, and we're trying to approach, analyze, and discuss these issues from very different perspectives. And one of them, the central perspective, is the perspective of the arts. And we're trying to do this not only as an object of study, not only looking at how art changed, how its institutions have mutated in connection with all the other mutations in society and in geopolitics, but we're also taking art as an instrument of research, of understanding these realities. And from this point of view, of course, we're very much interested in your particular position, which is, as we claim at this exhibition, very much unique in revisiting a certain kind of tradition of realism that has a complex genealogy and a history, both connected with developments in Russia, but at different moments of this history, this is very much connected with developments in the West. So, before we go to other points, I would like to ask you about this, about how you see your interest in realism, and where does this come from, in a way?
Cosmin, during your talk, huge picture was flowing before my eyes. All these years and all the change, and you have found very good word, mutations, because it didn't look very constructive. Didn't look very purpose, even from now. But at that time, because you mentioned 1989, and this was not a beginning, and this was not the end. And for Europe was maybe a very clear point, this falling of Berlin Wall. But for Russia, it was just a part of huge collapse or huge change and huge mutations which was going on. And for example, let's say Russian society, because it's still was Soviet Union, but started this years with trance, and it was really not figural things. It was TV was playing a huge role, and at that time, in Gorbachev time, all these spiritual or mystical or psychiatrists, they came to the screens, and TV was really
psychiatrists.
Yes, and it was a huge trance meditation seances but made for everyone. Like I remember the time, like for me this was a starting point of changing through this huge trance. You know, all population was put first in trance, and after things become changed. You know, and I remember people were even putting creams, water, shampoos, things in front of TV because they were told to do this, and to get a new energy, to get energy to improve. So, but it was already time was. I mean, it was quite mystical and quite with a lot of expectation, with belief in miracles. So, and for me, always this perestroika things. They didn't look so conscious. It was like things. I mean, this spirit of the time and spirit of the change in themselves. They were very strong. So I was going to say something else, but this was a very strange starting point of the things.
And how did this sort of like influence your work as an artist?
I always feel. So we also never even want to start. So because at that time I wasn't. Let's say if I call myself artist now, then at that time I wasn't at this position and this, and also when you say we are analyzing life from the point of former West, I mean I could be also the point to analyze, not only analyzer. So yes. I agree to be a subject, and especially at that time because.
But then let's do it now.
We already. I think our research, our exhibition, how we were discussing it at the beginning with you, if you remember, was like let's make a field of conscious. Like it can be artist conscious in this situation, but let's try build up for the landscape or the map with the details, and then we analyze them. So, and I agree. Don't be to be not only analyzer but also somebody who is analyzing.
So let's try to make this process of analysis here now. But, I mean, it's true that your own biography on one hand is in a way emblematic for many of these changes, even if only up to a point.
Yes, if you just take it, but the points. I mean, the changes they start even much earlier because. Also, the point was that in a very, very stagnative but also very stable part of late socialism, already. Brezhnev, he got a clinical death, and it was 1976. It means that after 1976, you could say that the general secretary he was after his death. And it was very obvious. So and
was the whole regime after his death, as a metaphor.
Yes. But this was also very, very physical and very visible. And from one hand, it was very strong, still a strong influence of the old regime science. But at the same time, it was like under the snow or under the ice, like quite thin surface, and after deep culture which only keep the rules. Like all these jokes and anecdotes, and it was like this was a mental field of people to live in, and so like this. Poetry about Brezhnev. You can tell it in Russia. Like, это что за Бармалей? So Barmaleum is a guy from Brother Grimm. Finger boy, my little finger. Some boy. I don't know what the translation, but Barmaley was somebody who was very frightening. And это что за Бармалей? К нам залез на мавзолей, so it's a mausoleum, and Barmaleum on the mausoleum. брови черные густые, речи долгие пустые. So он и маршал, и герой. Догадайся, кто такой. Кто даст правильный ответ, тот получит 10 лет. So it's like he is a marshal, he is a hero. You are like you're little. Yeah, you should guess who is him. And somebody who get right answer will get 10 years in a prison. So it was like in the model of very typical children poetry.
And a certain kind of humor.
So yes, it was everything was but it wasn't already dark because Stalin time passed away. So and everyone was feel like you need to protect yourself from to be quite accurate, but at the same time it was already very, very strong culture of this informal feelings, and at the same time it was already conference of union of cinematographical union, so and some very important films were allowed to be shown to the public, and it started already slowly, and so it was a lot of science. So what was the question? So we just analyzing the situation I was growing up, and I was at that time between school and institute in my cinema academy, and also spent a lot of time for study how to draw, because the cinema academy has a artistic department, and it means you can be or artist for the cinema, or you could be a cartoon master, so
an animator.
Animator. So for me, it was this department I was entering. But still, education was very conservative, and
why did you choose to do?
I like to draw always, and I like literature, and I like to try to convert literature to the words, to the images. So and now I have more hesitation about this relation, and I start to feel that words are more important, and it's sometimes very impossible to convert things like this. But it's very interesting and challenging process. And also, I mean, I like cartoons because Soviet cartoons history is also something else. It's very far from Disney experience. We have some influenced by Disney, but cartoon was, always children field, like culture for children, was like play to escape from strong censorship. So and because of this, we have very, very good examples in the children's literature. And
but in the same time, it was. I mean, it was, an escapist of some sort, but escapist field of some sort. But it was also, there was like a huge pressure in this field because the children were the future of the country and of the regime and of the idea. So there was always a certain kind of investment in the next generation that was maybe stronger than, or at least that it was portrayed to be, much more of a central point of the role of the state and of society than in the West.
Yes and not, because also the niche for Kabakov was making children books. A lot of artists were surviving by making children books, but also with a vision.
And it was well paid.
It was very well paid. And with cartoons, we even have a part which was called cartoons for the parents. How do you call it? For adults.
For adults.
Cartoons for adults, and this you can look at it after 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and they were critical to some things which were very stable and hard to criticize.
Such as?
always hints. You know, our culture is full of hints and full of as we like Aesop language. You know.
The regime sort of like created an appetite, but also a talent and skills for metaphors and allegories and twisted language, both in the visual fields and in literary fields throughout Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So.
And also habit how to live with the press, sometimes with the pressing, because sometimes the pressing was very hard, but sometimes you could find also to say from a moral side, it can be good and bad. I mean this habit to survive. You can achieve with this habit different results in behavior, but sometimes it's very interesting.
Okay, but this was happening at the beginning of Perestroika, or when did you actually?
Where I was at the beginning of Perestroika, in Moscow.
No, I'm just trying to see. This is not about a chronological account, but I'm trying to see this overlap between the developments in the country and in society and your own personal and artistic parcours.
Yes, and so I finished Cinema Academy in 1987, and also quite important point was that my daughter was born in 1986, and with all these quite heavy practical problems. It took a lot of time. I mean, I should. When I start to look back, I understood that it was really taking time process. So, and some things for me was accepted also through the television and through the talks and through, but also with not maybe as an artist, but it's very hard. I mean, things were very painful, and very unpredictable. People feel very insecure, and also to find a position immediately. Like because I wasn't a journalist, and to be even, let's say, animator in a sort of education I got was like to think. To rethink or to think about things which happened, but the life was so intensive and also so dramatical. I could even I remember the point when I really feel time changed when it was my daughter was like 1 year old, so it was like 87, 88 maybe, and I was watching TV. We have program. TV was changed completely, so it was a few programs. Also, it looks like now you could accept it as a video program because of very low quality of the picture, very fresh and not cut, not add comments, and everything was like real time, like direct translation. But I remember the case. On the TV, they describe a situation like this is a yard. In the yard they build a house. It's in a sleeping district. It's like just margin of Moscow, and it was a big hall, and one boy he fell down in the hole. And I remember myself like I'm just watching it and expecting the end when they will pick up the boy and say this is how we did, and after they say and the boy died, and for me it was really shock because before I understood that before it was never bad news from TV.
Yes, not even when it was about things that were not in the control of the regime.
Yes, and especially like they even show all these things, like this. And after I've seen a lot of bad news with all details, like even TV of Perestroika was overloaded by this, let's say, yellow press details, all crimes, all gossips, like all things which are usually usually they were controlled. But this was a really beginning, and
But let's go back to your work. No, because I'm curious. Like, how did this? And I don't know. What were you thinking then about what you were doing in relationship with, or no relationship, but still, you know, how did you see at that point your work as an artist, and how should that be placed in this process of transformation? But also, how do you regard from the position of in which you are now, your work and your ideas from that times?
I started with some. So at that time, I also was making children books, few, and and also I made few paintings which disappeared and in the perestroika, and because yeah, of course you remember but you know about the time that because of all this change and because of Gorbachev and because of this Soviet bloc just was released after the strong domination of Soviet regime, Gorbachev was very popular, and Russia, let's say Soviet Union, but almost call it Russia, but factually it was Soviet Union that time. So, but it was very, very popular, and to be an artist, to be a young artist, or even just as we all with my friends and people I knew, we just started, and it was very big credit for art, and it was very big interest. And very little experience was already accepted as experience, and was I never was in the position to struggle to say, oh, I am an artist and I am not accepted to any place which I want to be. But I was more concentrated on things I am doing, but things around, they were really attentive to activity of young Russian artists. So I was making a few paintings, and after somehow all this, let's say, history of art came, or history of contemporary art, which was completely closed and forbidden, even forbidden. In a time when I was studying, it's suddenly become open with all this experience, with feeling like, I don't know, very, very simple, because even our 20s, it was known, but it wasn't in a part of academical education.
Yeah.
And I mean, all this feeling like the canvas is not a window, for example. Canvas is flat. Canvas have both sides. You know, all these things are like very basic for 20th century. Become for me like experience which it goes through my hands. So, and I was making object from the painting itself, from the oil paint, from the canvases and from the wood frames, constructing it as a cakes.
As cakes.
Yes. And I made a series of such objects, and I was doing it like maybe 2 years, and I remember even, but reaction of some critics. I remember the situation in the atelier was like, oh, they look so tasty, and they already become object of. How to call it, to wish them, because it was
desire.
Object of the desire, because already food became a problem at that time. So it was never real hunger, but it was very, very reduced, and we at that time we had these cards,
coupons,
talons, like things to get basic food. So, and for this it was like, and also it's the strange actuality of those objects become later, like 15 years later, when art in Russia become about to be object of desire, about all this beauty and sweet and
but of a different kind of desire, or
yes.
like ultimately probably the same raw desire of having and of avoiding the anonymous and the perceived darkness of the sort of like Soviet uniformity, but there's a significant difference in scale, in quantity, between the kind of desires that were around at the height of perestroika and the kind of like desires that the artists of today in Russia have in mind. There's a difference of scale, of wealth, of intensity,
If I understood you right, but I was the thing what I was maybe trying to explain, that this subject were like more the critique of the art, which sometimes become the object of desire, but without any commas. So it's just a direct desire, and and also for me, like when I was later on in Holland, for example, I was restrict somehow the field. Like I didn't want to work with the things which are taboo. Like because it's so simple. If you are an artist, you always expected to step over the border. Step over the border and make things which forbidden, let's say, for the normal conscience. But for me, it was always like I tried to work with things which are allowed, but for me are more significant and more enigmatic and more simple. So and come back to this mutation time. These all simple things, they were in a movement in such a unshaped and way which was very difficult to analyze. So and let's say at that time I was working with objects which were not directly taken from the life itself. And with this, let's call cake research, I was looking through books, and I found one book which was made in Soviet time, book how to make bread, how to make the pastries, and it was an amazing book because all illustrations were made in black and white pictures, and illustrations were very strange, very unusual. You never see the personality. You only see hands, anonymous hands. It's difficult to say women or men, female or male. And they were always from the top, from the bottom of the picture. And they were doing things. I mean, I can simply demonstrate you how is possible to illustrate the Bible. Because it was really first step of the creation, like making the water, making dark and light, even how to divide the evil and good, because it was like two hands dividing the let's say nuts, but some black, some white, and things very very basic. But at the same time, this book was it's not a school book, but the book which
had an educational
moment, how to teach, how to make it. So it was a book to teach you how to make things by yourself. So how to be part of this cosmogonical, this huge process. And it was a really amazing book, and it was the beginning of the project. Quite developed later, but this was a starting point. And for me, maybe this is the first project which already has which you can call a starting point, and can find in other work I was doing later, the trace of this beginning work, because it was really evoking somebody like to be creative, or to do things which is pure creation, but at the same time with a very modest and very simple shape. So and I was making painting from this book, and photographs later, and some objects. And this was already beginning of 90, like end of beginning of 90s.
And then you moved to the West, to Holland.
I wouldn't say it like this, because in 1993, I think, Rijksacademy, when I was studying later, they had a trip, because it's a rule of academy to have trip every year at the beginning, when all participants come together. They have together trip to place which is interesting and which is unusual. So it was Russia, so it was Moscow, and
Russia in 1993.
Yes, so they came, and they brought some applications, and they were explaining how good is academy, and so it was quite unusual, because as I knew later, this academy was quite difficult to enter. I mean, they have, I'm very bad with numbers, but they have a huge amount of application.
Yes.
So, and for me was always, I start with many hesitation if I should go or not, and I started it as a 1 year idea to go for 1 year, even maybe shorter. So I wasn't sure if I stay longer, but somehow it took a long time. And I would say also I have quite special vast experience, because also I came with first year I was alone with my daughter. And it was like starting many things which were somehow settled in Russia.
Like this interest in the objects of desire of Russian society in that moment.
So I think to come back again with with the topic of former West. I think that maybe the most in an abstract, the most visible field when we can call it former is the illusion of Soviet illusion of Soviet mind, because for example, if you will watch now interviews of Soviet intelligence of late 90s, you always can find things. I mean, the descriptions to say we lost 70 years of the culture. We were just a whole of 70 years. There is an ideal country which calls West. Where all
where we stayed on, we stand still, and that country developed for 70 years.
And they are normal. They are how people supposed to be. And this was the description from monolith East, or from monolith Soviet bloc. To describe monolith capitalistic whole. It was very much exaggerated, I think, and even people, I know they don't think like this anymore. It was also one anecdote. late Soviet anecdote, or early Russian.
Late Soviet, early Russian.
Yes, about Chukcha and Chukotka. It's our northwest point, like a farthest
Northeast.
Northeast point. Just nothing go further. No place to go further. So it's a demi.
It's close to Alaska.
Demi island, how we call it, Peninsula. Yes, and this very small population of people they live there. So they are very far from all the meanings. And one from them, and it was a lot of anecdotes about them. And one, he's a Chukcha. He was sent from his place to Moscow, and his relatives asked him to buy something, and they asked him to buy deficit. Deficit, I think it's international.
Deficit, yes. If it's the same thing.
It's like something which is very difficult to get. It's something which is it's not enough for everyone. So deficit. And he said, but how can I recognize the deficit for you? They say it's simple. You go to Moscow and you see lines everywhere. People stay in a queue. Well, you find just very big and you stay. And then you get deficit, the best deficit. So he came to Moscow. He found huge line. He stood in. After he came back to his relatives, and they say, "So, did you buy the deficit?" He said, "No." Why? Because you know what's happened. The line was such a long, and time I was standing, the seller was dead. So I didn't get anything. So and everyone was sure that he was staying in the line to mausoleum.
The Lenin mausoleum. Yes.
So it means it's a little bit the metaphor of Soviet mind. So line and expectation to the West were so long that when this mind came to West, the West was dead.
And mumified. That's very important.
Yes, and mumified. But it's also.
But still, you were here. So how did you? Then I would like to ask this actually more in relation with like art, because you were familiar with like models and ideas that, you know, were obviously not so different from the way in which a good part of the mainstream discourse was trying to sort of like differentiate between artistic practice, you know, on the other side of the Iron Curtain. But still, how did you deal with, you know, this perceived difference, with this perceived difficulty to translate, to compare, to the artistic practice, the languages that were used here, the fashions at the time, and what you were working with there in Russia?
I think all this development of art now show us that it lost any frames, and now to find a frame, to make a definition what's art and what's not is now very much depend on the context. And
no, but I'm asking about that particular moment when you were at the Rijksacademy.
Yes, but at the same, I mean, from one hand, I'm not sure that I'm an artist. So that time and this time doesn't matter when. And only this why I started with this image of losing frames. So I would say this field, which accepts my activity, is okay. And I learned, and I used to the idea that contemporary art found many new roots, like genealogy become very spreaded. So even let's say social service becomes also the root of the art, or any activity. It's difficult to say what's not the root for the art for our time. So because of this, it's okay to. I'm not struggling anymore, because I was really at some period of my life was really not sure if I can call myself an artist, and I was always, let's say, a watcher. Always did little drawings. Always try to. It depends what you can. Maybe the idea to call yourself artist or not. It's how you find your mental friends, and I can maybe if I present you my, let's say, team or of my beloved the creature, creatures or their authors. A lot of them could be from literature, and but a lot of
who
them,
are they?
A lot of them. I can describe maybe the Soviet Russian part of things. Like then would be amazing writer of 20th century, Yuri Alesha. And he was very famous, and also he has a nickname king of metaphors, and this poetical and metaphorical way to perceive the world for him was always the way to survive. Also because he was very much pressed by the system. He started as a new talent, and after he was not in a straight, not in a stream, which he's supposed to be as a new talent. So and he finished quite forgotten, and but also his activity was he did writing every day. And now it's one of my favorite book, has a title "No One Day Without the Phrase," and then it's like little notes, and they are very deep and very interesting, and they can mark the time for me, like much more than not all, but the long historical description. Or like Platonov, for example, or Russian realism is very important for me, and there are some names which are maybe underestimated, and one is Leonid Solomatkin. He's a great artist of 19th century, and he didn't belong. We have very famous movement called Peredvizhniki, and this was more ideologically motivated. So they left academy, they went to public, they spread the public, they really move with their paintings, and each painting has a drama or social conflict as a main subject. And Solomatkin was more like a singer, like a poet, and he was always making quite small paintings, and a lot of them survived, hopefully. Also you can call it social criticism, but the difference was that you always can feel he put himself in the position of the heroes, of the characters. Then every picture is not it's become more philosophical and more like the stuff of the picture is different. Everything has a strange light of how do you call it? Empathy. Yeah. So well,
these are all things. I mean, while you go through these descriptions, they seem to be like you talking about your own work. So it does make sense. This sort of.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Elective affinities.
Maybe it's. I have it let's say the box with the treasures. So and Solomatkin and Alesha, for example.
And Wales.
Where? You mean?
In Wales, or.
else?
No, who else?
Well, Platonov. Definitely. And so I would say I'm not. I mean, ideology is very interesting, but for me, I only this social criticism wouldn't direct way to build up the good piece of art. Like, you know, we have dissidents. It's Maria Vasilievna Rozanova when she was in Paris with Sinyavsky. So it was a huge Soviet process. I mean, the court, he was in prison. Yes. After, so it's so they were already in Paris, and she made an interview, and she said, I know, and she became an immigrant, and she became the part of new culture as well. And she said, ideology doesn't mean much anymore. Aesthetical questions are more important. So, and from her mouth to listen yes. to hear this was very very surprising, very surprisingly.
But of course, she referred to, and I guess you're also referring to a certain kind of understanding of aesthetics that is not an innocent one, in a way, that has repercussions and responsibilities that go beyond the work and the situation of the aesthetical experience in the exhibition room. So it is, I assume, that kind of aesthetics that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because for me is, I mean, why maybe I started with such a long past images like Russian realism, because what I'm interested in is like all these things, the very basic things, how they show up in different time, in different circumstances, and this how visible, invisible, inner, superficial, even with light and with a snow, like figures in a how social drama can change the body movement. I mean, all things which maybe you can describe them through ideology, but also I always have to find a point which can evoke emotions. Like, for example, piece of Andrei Sala, which I like very much, with his mother. It's
the interview.
Yes, for me is a very important point. I mean, it's a very good piece, and very has a lot of meanings. But when his mother cannot recognize, he denied the words she was saying, and only after reconstruction it's possible to fix it. So it's like what's happened with conscious through all these crucial mutations, which you could describe from things which are visible, but for me is more interesting how these little changes appear, and how they become visual. So it's like all these 90s. We have a lot of freedom, but also at the same time flat. Like Gertsen was saying, it's very difficult to get out of the chains around the body, but how you can get out the chains around the brain, and this is and for me the most interesting what's happened with the brain.
What's happened with the brain?
It's slow, almost invisible, and very double movement. Always to different sides simultaneously.
We are getting closer to the end of our conversation. One thing that I would like to ask, because, and this I ask to everyone that we're talking to, like, how do you think we should approach this? I mean, of course, we have like our own methods and our own instruments, but what part of this exploration of the former West project and of this very complex, as you sort of emphasized, and your entire talk was basically about, or like our entire conversation today was about trying to prove the complexities of every moment, of every issue, of every idea, of every aspect of this transformation and of the former West project. What aspect do you think would be the most important one not to miss when we look at this transformation of 20 years, 25 years of this ongoing process?
Always we talk about East-West connection. So we are not talking about clear West picture. So now we are from this corner, and unfortunately, I think we are now. To present, let's say, West part from this dialogue, which even an abstract frame. I think this disposition will change very soon again, because what I feel. Russia is now in the front of big changes, and
of what nature?
We were talking about late 80s with a stagnation, for example, and now we have this stagnation, but we don't have anecdotes, and it's a very bad sign. And I think mentality also change, and reality change, and all signs are telling that it will not stable. So, and this disposition, West-East, will change again, and I think quite soon. And I'm not expecting something very, very light and easy and very positive. We have to watch, and we have to be all the time at the presence, and all the time very attentive. So, and don't construct don't build up the construction which we will break down very, very soon.
But is this something that you do in your works? Because you're always very attentive of like many aspects of reality. Is this what you're doing?
Yes, yes, right. Just about talking this West-East models. I have one example which I would like maybe to explain you as a final.
No, please.
In 80s was built up because of the Olympiad, and before Olympic
Yes.
Games, was built up very big complex in Moscow and Soviet Union, and in that time it was the guest in Moscow, one very famous but also quite hidden, the master of Tai Chi, Chinese teacher, and he came to this complex. And he's somehow the sportman as well, like about the sport in China. So, and he have seen the letters which were part of decoration of this place, which were Citius, Altius, and I think Fortius. And he was really amazed. He was standing in front of it, and he said, "How strange! We have just the opposite. You should be as slow as you can. You should don't use any physical power, so not this force. And also you should go down to the earth when you are exercise and when you act, because earth is very important." And you should also be a very not a weak, but not use a power, not powerful, not fortuitous. Because if you use physical power, you miss the power of the this energy, like power which is above you, which is your everything, which is so that if you use all the things which are very rational, then you are very restricted. And for me, is maybe the model of Europe is this rationality, which has a restriction, but also has a lot of responsibility for the human being and for the person itself. And in let's say in Russia, it's not so much about responsibility. It's always if it's much more important if you love things or you hate things than if you respect things. So, and I think these mental borders, this dividing, still exist somehow. But also the position of Russia is in between West and East, but it's another talk.
Thank you very much, Olga.
I feel like I didn't answer to any.
But that's probably much better.
I'm afraid. Anyway.
Or if you want to add something else.
No, I'm sorry.
Super.
I took so much time. I'm sorry.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosmin.